If you go, will you send us a letter from the internet? Do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. The Proclaimers?
Oh, sorry.
Do you not know the Proclaimers?
I know the Proclaimers as far as 500 Miles, of course, and Sunshine on Leith. They're a musical, which I haven't actually seen. I just know they have one.
Okay, it's seriously, the Proclaimers are like one of the best bands ever. Like, I love the Proclaimers so much. They're really great from top down.
Uh-huh. I trust you.
Okay.
Greetings, friends and letter writers. Welcome to this very special bonus edition of Critically Acclaimed, the podcast where highbrow and lowbrow collide.
Oh, wait, hang on.
Oh, God!
It was a little late.
A little bit of a delay. It was one of those slow explosions that you can outrun down a hallway. We are coming to you at a special, non-usual time because we want to respond to you in an appropriate way. Oh, we should probably introduce ourselves.
Real fast, yeah.
My name is Witney Seibold. I'm a critic for the internet. I don't have a cool nickname, but my co-host does.
Yeah, my name is Bibbiani. I'm also a critic for the internet, and everyone calls me Bibbs. I don't know if that's a cool nickname, but there you go.
And to launch back into my tirade, we receive a lot of letters at criticallyacclaimedfans@gmail.com, and for various reasons over the course of the recent weeks, we've had to cut our episodes short, usually because we work right up to like other deadlines that we have to just sort of bail and take care of.
Yeah, we usually record this on a Saturday, and Witney frequently works nights on a Saturday.
I do still have a Joe job, so
Joe job?
Yeah. You know,
like an average Joe
an
job?
Average Joe, a normal job.
Okay.
And we don't often get, well, I guess we don't always get a chance to read the letters you send us. So we are going to spend a special chunk of today doing nothing but answering letters.
That's right. Again, if you send us your letters, we try to read all that we can. We literally can't read all of them because you guys send us a lot of letters, but we try to read as many as we can, and we're going to do a little bit of catching up today. So thank you everybody who wrote in. We're going to do this for at least an hour, maybe hour and a half.
We have some people who write in a lot. We have some people who write in... I've never written in before, but we're going to get in a little of everything. So if you have written in, keep your fingers crossed. We might read your letter. And we're going to catch up with a letter from Michael. We're going to start with Michael. Hello,
Hi, Michael.
Hello, William and Whitney. Thank you for a great podcast. I really enjoy it. Next letter is... No, I'm kidding. I've got a relatively simple question. What is the worst movie to make you cry? My choice would have to be Marley and Me. Curious to hear what you say. Thanks, and keep up the fantastic content, Michael.
So what we're saying is we know the movie isn't good, but it hits our buttons anyway.
Yeah, it still kind of gets under your skin.
I'm gonna give like kind of like an answer that might tick some people off because I know a lot of people still love this movie. But Forrest Gump. I know Forrest Gump won Best Picture. It's kind of it's from a technical perspective, it's a marvel. There's a lot of things I really like about the movie. But I find, as the years have gone on, that the message of the movie is this sort of weird complacency about a lot of America's real troubles.
Yeah.
And I find it really harsh to Jenny, who, doesn't have some of the advantages, ironically, that Forrest Gump has, and the movie's just really cruel to her, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't like Forrest Gump, I think, overall. I think initially I was very enamored of it, but the more I thought about it, the more it just rubbed me the wrong way.
I even remembered hearing criticisms at the time of how it really tried to argue that Vietnam was a good war. And I
think it overlooked the greater issues of the Vietnam War, at least.
Yeah, by kind of glossing over that and not addressing it, it sounds like it's really kind of
basically
advocating.
the person who doesn't the person who just lets kind of America tell him what to do gets all the rewards, and the person who actually tries to go out on their own and try to live their life their own way gets punished. Yeah. So I don't care for Forrest Gump right now. However, the scene where Lieutenant Dan drags Forrest Gump off of his bunk and sobs, telling him, "You should have let me die in the jungle," is so beautifully acted by Gary Sinise in particular. And because I think Lieutenant Dan's whole arc in that movie is actually way more interesting than Forrest Gump's. And I love Lieutenant Dan as a character. I think Lieutenant Dan is a very interesting character, and I think Gary Sinise finds something really beautiful and human in that character. And that scene, and I think the scene where Lieutenant Dan finds some sort of peace, those both make me really misty-eyed, even though I don't actually like the rest of the movie all that much. Well, there's stuff I like in it, but overall, Forrest Gump rubs me the wrong way.
My sister put it really, really well when we saw Titanic back in the late 90s. Titanic made everybody cry.
Sure.
Not a dry eye in the house. And it made me cry.
Sure.
Titanic made me cry.
I like Titanic.
It was very, very moving. And I appreciate it now more as sort of this technical marvel and just sort of how efficiently it gets stuff done more than I can really get behind anything emotional behind it.
William Goldman, who wrote the screenplays for Princess Bride and The Marathon Man and Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid and Misery.
Dreamcatcher.
And Dreamcatcher. I'm not saying he's perfect, but he is one of the best screenwriters we've ever had. And he used to write a series of articles for Premiere in which he looked at every Best Picture nominee that year very seriously from a screenwriting perspective. And one of the things he argued about Titanic was the dialogue is clunky. It oversells a lot of its points. From just pure storytelling, in terms of here's the structure of it, Titanic is kind of impeccable. Titanic tells a good story, just sometimes the little incidental moments are really weird and silly.
I feel like it's an impeccable structure with no meat on, nothing hanging on it. It's just the structure.
I understand why. I don't think it was even nominated for Best Screenplay. It definitely didn't win, though. I understand why it didn't win.
One 100 others.
I'm going to look at
my sister put it really well when she said that she saw Titanic, it made her cry, and then she got angry at the man for making her cry. It's like this manufactured manipulative piece of crap. It actually worked on me, and I resent that. So yeah, that one kind of stings a little bit.
I can see that.
I nearly teared up a little bit.
It was not nominated for screenplay.
Okay, I nearly teared up when I saw the recent reboot of The Muppets, because they bothered to use the Rainbow Connection, and F you, that's a cheap shot and you know it, and it still kind of works.
The Rainbow Connection is one of the great cheap shot karaoke songs. Because here's the thing because the thing is, you go to karaoke, people want you to sing. I love singing, and I actually have a pretty good range, so I'll do whatever. But I know a lot of people who just say, I don't know what to sing. And one thing I always tell them is Rainbow Connection. Yeah. A, everyone knows it, so you get everyone singing along. B, doesn't require a lot of bravado or anything like that. It's actually a pretty mild song.
Yeah, it doesn't require a lot of range.
You can even talk it out a lot of the time, and you can get through it. But everyone has this emotional connection to it. It's such a simple, pure, emotional little ditty that it's a cheap shot. It works though, and I love that reboot of The Muppets. I think that's a really good movie.
It's good, but there wasn't anything in the movie that was deeply moving me. But they knew where that nostalgia spot was, exactly where it was, and this black little raisin of a heart I have. They were able to reach in with this little tool and tweak it a little bit.
Oh my god!
So again, I can't call that a bad movie, but I recognize what they were doing when they did it.
Fair enough. What do we got next?
Here's a letter from Hayden. Hello, Hayden.
Hi, Hayden.
He says, "Hello. One of my New Year's resolutions is to watch more Ingmar Bergman. I've already seen Persona and Cries and Whispers. Good for you. Some of the best movies ever made, which are films I loved. Since I know Witney is a massive fan, I was wondering what to watch next. I want to watch Fanny and Alexander, but I don't know which version to watch. Do you prefer the theatrical version or the director's cut? Thanks for reading and answering."
This is a Witney question.
You could give yourself a film education, and a philosophy education and a theology education just with the filmography of Ingmar Bergman. When people ask what his best movie is, I usually say Persona, but he does a lot of really great classics. If you haven't seen The Seventh Seal yet, see The Seventh Seal, because that's kind of
The Seventh Seal,
most famous, the most celebrated of his movies.
I think The Seventh Seal and Persona, at least, should be required viewing for anyone who wants a serious education in cinema, because it unlocks a lot of other things.
Yeah.
A lot of other movies and films and TV and comic books and everything, they explicitly reference those movies.
Yeah.
In a way that even some of his other great films are not referenced. That being said, I have seen way fewer of his films than you have. But yeah, I think Persona and Seventh Seal are the two you should start with.
If you're looking for Fanny and Alexander, I actually haven't seen the theatrical cut. all the way through. I've only seen the extended 5.5 hour cut, and it's spectacular. And if you're going to do it, I encourage you do it in as few sittings as possible, even though I think it aired over the course of several nights on Swedish television, that version. The Silence of God trilogy is also kind of a big key to unlocking Ingmar Bergman, especially Winter Light, the second installment. The three films in that trilogy are Through a Glass Darkly, Winter Light, and The Silence. And they're only thematically connected. It's not like one of those things where the characters go on further adventures. Yeah, Through a Glass Darkly, suffering families on an island. Winter Light, suffering priest, reading Kierkegaard, dealing with his flagging faith, and the Silence is very explicitly about the silence of God. And Bergman himself was very ambivalent about faith, and he had a pastor father who was abusive, and I think all of this is really coming through in those particular three films. The Silence isn't the greatest of the three, but yeah, that's sort of a key to unlocking Bergman. I could go on and on about Bergman.
You sure could,
but I'm not gonna, because we have more letters to read.
Okay, I'm gonna. Here's what I'm gonna do. You're kind of moving from the back.
Yeah,
I'm gonna move from the front.
Okay,
we're gonna meet in the middle of it. And that way, we're not only talking about stuff we talked about.
Be sure
ago.
to mark the ones you read with a star.
Sure. Okay. Right. Here's one from Aaron Turner. Mm-hmm. Dear Bibbs and Witney, I really enjoyed the Ready Player One discussion and thought that you both made some very good arguments about how the movie does not quite work, yet bits are entertaining. I hate to be the guy, but in the book, some of your concerns are taken care of.
But in the book, okay.
All right, so, for instance, Parzival does attend school in the Oasis on the planet Ludus. Ludus is seen briefly at the beginning of the film. So he does go to school.
He goes to school in the game. Okay.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. There are planets where there is no combat allowed, which allows lower-level players to acquire XP by completing quests without fear of being murdered by a more powerful player, like World of Warcraft. Okay.
Oh, is that like in that South Park episode where they build up their skill by like murdering boars?
That's
they
not
got like one experience point each.
South Park simplified that, but yeah, because that was one of my issues with the movie is that it looks like you can be killed literally anywhere, and that's not necessarily fun. So if the book explained that, fair enough. Sex is explained in the book. Certain sensors and attachments can be added to your rig. Yeah, that's this one weird thing in Ready Player One where the hero gets this like full bodysuit rig, which allows him to feel
when
things
somebody
that happen
touches him.
But it's mostly used for getting kicked in the crotch.
Well, and
it hurts.
It's used for getting shot and it gets hurt. And
why would you turn that setting off?
There's a commercial. There's a commercial in the background for one of those suits in the world of Ready Player One, and we didn't bring this up in our review, but yeah, there's all these people like enthusiastically looking at the camera saying, "Yeah, you could feel what it's really like to get shot." And I really hoped there would be this kind of weird masochistic streak that the film would explore. Like, and yeah, this is only real if you feel real pain. This is the only thing that's real anymore.
Yeah,
but. Yeah, that's Stuart Gordon's Ready Player One.
Anyway, moving on. The reason IOI, the evil corporation, wants control of the Oasis is that when the Oasis was launched, the game and the internet were free. If IOI gained control, they would essentially control the internet, charge people for the usage, and if you couldn't pay, you would work in their customer service department until the debt was paid, which it never would be. Yeah, that sounds like Terry Gilliam.
Yeah.
The Iron Giant is only mentioned in passing in the book. I think they may have sucked the character in because they couldn't get the rights to Ultraman. Maybe that's the case. In conclusion, I really enjoyed the book. I realize some elements are problematic, but I found it to be essentially Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with more things I love. Thanks.
All right.
Fair enough. This is an issue of an adaptation, and some people are like, when we review something that we're not super familiar with, people are like, well, did you even read it? Well, sometimes you watch an adaptation of a thing before you've read it.
Yeah.
That just happens. And I think having that perspective can be valuable because sometimes your awareness of how something is supposed to work can affect how your awareness of how something is actually working in a new medium. Case in point, a lot of people, when they watch the Harry Potter movies, they've read the books and they're kind of filling in some narrative gaps.
Of which there are a lot, especially in the later movies.
Yeah, from Harry Potter 5 onward, and even 3 quite a bit, they leave out a lot of stuff that actually is pretty important to the character development and the plot.
But later on, so yeah, it doesn't.
Sometimes even right away.
Well, when I saw Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, that's the third one.
Yeah,
there was a bit where. That's where they have the light spell that scares off the death specters, and he casts the light spell and he scares off the specters, and then it's not strong, or it's not strong enough, and then another light spell from across the lake hits the Death Spectre and it scares it away. And
it's called. I love you so much right now. It's called a Patronus. Someone is yelling at us right now in their car. Yeah. It's called a Patronus. It's not a light spell.
I give a care.
I'm just saying. It's like if you said you used to watch Star Wars and those space wizards and they have that mind pushy power. It's called the Force. I'm just going to say,
if you could say
the
a space wizard gave a mind push, I'd still understand what you're talking about.
I love The Last Jedi for finally calling them space wizards with laser swords.
Yeah,
I've had so many Star Wars.
They used the phrase laser sword in one of the prequels, I think. Young Anakin says laser sword.
Okay, well, when Mark Hamill says space wizards with laser swords, I felt so vindicated because I was like, ultimately, as much as we love Star Wars, it is a film about space wizards with laser swords, and huge Star Wars fans, some of whom will be familiar to fans of the schmoes, just rolled their eyes and left the room because they couldn't stand to look at me, and I'm like, Luke agrees.
So
I digress.
So the petroleum spell. I did that
That's
on
me
purpose.
hitting my head.
I did that on purpose. So he casts his Patronus, and there's another one across the lake, but he can't see who's casting it, but it takes the form of this glowing elk. And we don't know why. We don't know why there's a glowing stag across the lake. And he immediately after that happens, he turns to a friend and says, "It was my father. My father did that." And wait, what? What is the hell does that mean?
The movie doesn't give you enough information.
Why was there a glowing stag? What does that have to do with the light spell? Why do you think that's your father? And they kind of explain it very briefly in one scene 2 movies later.
Yeah.
Actually, it turns out those light spells have animal shapes.
Well, they're personalized.
And there's your spirit animal comes out through. And
a stag was Harry Potter's father.
You could have explained that a little bit better.
Yes, you could have. It's weird. My favorite one of those is from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, which is actually one of my favorite books in that whole
series.
When
they talk about what the Half-Blood Prince is?
Yeah, I'm not going to, just in case you haven't read it or seen it, because it's kind of like a twisty kind of thing, but when you finally find out who the Half-Blood Prince is, because that's part of the mystery. Who is the Half-Blood Prince? Someone just says, "Oh yeah, I'm the Half-Blood Prince." And they never actually explain what the expression Half-Blood Prince means. Now, even in the book, it's actually not as whoa, that's what that means. But there is an explanation, and it wouldn't have taken more than a sentence or 2. And it's really weird that they never explain why that's a thing. They assume you know it. A good adaptation should exist in its own construct. Now, it can change things, it can leave things out, but when you watch it on its own, it should basically function. And if a movie adapts a book or a comic book, a video game, whatever, and it leaves out stuff that the audience later goes, "That's stupid, where was that stuff?" They shouldn't have left that out. That's my argument.
Yeah.
But fair enough. And maybe the book is often better. What are you going to do?
Here's a letter from JD. Hey, JD. Hey, Whitney and Bibbs. I'm a new listener ever since you started on the SK podcast, but now I never miss. You guys are incredibly insightful and hilarious. Oh, pshaw. The only downside that I see is I can't see you guys talking about your mashups. And that's me and a selfish nitpick. I had a question for you. I was born in 1985, so I wasn't around when a lot of these movies you're talking about came out theatrically, but I was curious on your opinion of the following situation.
Yes.
Most cinephiles know that E.T. the Extraterrestrial came out in 1982, 2 weeks before The Thing, John Carpenter's film did.
Yeah, and Blade Runner.
Yeah.
The Thing, Blade Runner, and I think Megaforce all came out on the same weekend. That's a hell of a weekend.
Wow.
And it was right after E.T.
And you know which one I would have seen? I would have been eager to see Megaforce.
Yeah.
Most cinephiles know that E.T. the Extraterrestrial did that. From what I've gathered, the fact that E.T. was a family-friendly feature with a cute-ish alien, it looks like he says it looks like a hairless scrotum to me now.
It looked like that then too.
And The Thing was an R-rated gore fest that crippled The Thing in the box office. The Thing wasn't a hit when it first came out.
The Thing, a lot of the movies that we love now were not hits when they first came out. The Thing wasn't a hit. Blade Runner wasn't a hit. Hell, It's a Wonderful Life wasn't a hit.
Yeah.
It happens.
This caused E.T. to get critically acclaimed, and only in the years following has The Thing reached its cult status. With that oversimplification of the facts, my question to you is, if The Thing were released 2 weeks before E.T., and the roles had been reversed, would The Thing have been critically acclaimed, and would E.T. have been panned and gotten its cult following? Or would The Thing and E.T. both be critically acclaimed? Or say The Thing came out 6 months before E.T., would that change it from a cult classic to alien level acclaim? Basically, I'm asking, what would it have taken to get The Thing the recognition it deserves rather than just a cult following? The story is simple yet endearing. The acting is terrific. The special effects rival that of E.T. or Alien. And it has a great sense of building tension. It leaves you with questions, but you don't feel gypped if there aren't any answers. Thanks for reading my email. Keep up the great entertaining work. My 5-year-old daughter, Alyssa, listens to you with me, and she loves your cold opens.
Oh, thank
especially your Total Recall cold open.
Thank you
She can't
so much.
stop singing it, and I can't either.
Thank you. Okay, there's
First
two
of all,
things going on here.
The Thing is no longer underrated by any stretch.
But it was for many years.
It was
wasn't until like the 90s at least that it started getting kind of wide acclaim.
It was the home video market that really kind of rescued The Thing. And now
The Thing
everyone
is,
has
just in
seen.
case anyone doesn't know, The Thing is a fantastic film directed by John Carpenter. It's a remake of a horror classic called The Thing from Another World. It's about an alien attacking an outpost in the Antarctic.
And it has no shape, and it absorbs beings and takes their shape.
And the makeup effects are terrifying and innovative, and they look just as good today.
I don't think the non-success of The Thing had anything to do with E.T. They're both alien sci-fi, arguably effects-based thrillers, but The Thing was a horror movie, and horror movies are constantly in a state where it's rare that a horror movie is a huge hit. I mean, we had stuff like It recently, and
like a giant
horror movies
yeah.
tend to make a lot of money, but it's because they can also be made for really cheaply. And that was kind of an expensive-ish movie for its genre. It was really kind of stead. It was very quiet, and that's a tough sell for like the grindhouse audiences.
And there's nothing romantic about it. It's a very cynical movie. In fact, there are no female characters. There's no gay characters either. There's no like romance in it. So there's really kind of nothing like wholesome and like positive to latch onto. It's part of what is called John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy because it feels desolate and apocalyptic. It's kind of forcing you to not like go, yeah!
There's one female character, and it is the voice of the chess computer.
Apologies.
That Kurt Russell plays at the beginning, and what happens to it? He pours beer in it and kills it. Like right at the start of the movie.
That is rather harsh. I think what happened here, I think the other thing you have to remember is that at the time, people generally weren't really comparing E.T. to The Thing because they were clear, even though they both had aliens, they're clearly different genres. E.T. is a wholesome family film. The Thing is trying to scare the shit out of you. What we're really dealing with here is two different levels. Why didn't critics like it, and why wasn't it a hit? And those are two different conversations. It wasn't a hit, partially because of E.T., because everyone was going to see E.T. over and over again. They weren't going to see a lot of new movies, so a lot of movies that came out in the wake of E.T. just dissolved.
Got swallowed up,
and that happens,
like Megaforce.
And that happens sometimes when you have a movie that is not just successful, but successful for an extended period of time, and a lot of movies that probably thought like, oh yeah, we'll come out January after Titanic, surely the buzz will have died down. Then Titanic steamrolls all over them. It took until the end of March, I think, for any movie to best Black Panther at the box office, just because it was such a huge hit, even though some of those were good movies in the middle.
I remember very explicitly what film unseated Titanic to be number one at the box office.
Was it Lost in Space?
It was Lost in Space, which is a crap film.
Which came out in like April. Like it was a long time.
It was February, but yeah.
No, was it February? No, because Man in the Iron Mask was February, and that didn't... No, okay, I'm looking that up, because I didn't buy that.
I'm pretty sure.
I didn't buy that at all.
Look up the release date of Lost in Space.
I'm looking at Lion Space.
Over a month, number one at the box office every single weekend for a month and a half, that's still dang impressive.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. It came out April 3rd.
Really, that late?
Titanic was a monster.
Holy balls, yeah.
So... E.T. siphoned away audiences, including many audiences who probably would have appreciated it, but also at the time, and this is a reason why a lot of the current generation of critics who are in their 30s got into the film critic business, myself included, is because there was a time when horror was not respected as a genre. Every once in a while you get a film like The Exorcist or The Haunting.
It's still not.
It's still not, but it's more so because there are more critics who are in a position of some authority who actually do argue that it is art. But there was a real snootiness to the way practically every critic, approached horror in the 80s. Watch some clips of Siskel and Ebert railing on the Friday the 13th movies sometimes.
Well,
they're mean.
To be fair, those movies are pretty terrible.
but they're mean about it. And they don't understand even why they exist. They're not even trying. And it's frustrating. Critics were mean to The Thing. Critics just were turned off. They thought horror had to be a certain kind of thing. The Thing wasn't that thing. We weren't ready for it. The thing wasn't that thing.
The Thing wasn't the thing. That's a good t-shirt, isn't it?
That's pretty good. But, like, yeah, people just weren't ready for that at the moment. And certainly critics at the time had very particular ideas about what was a good horror movie.
Yeah.
And most things weren't. It was a damn shame.
Yeah.
And we're trying to move on from that, but there's always something. It took a real long time. Granted, it took a long time to make really good ones consistently, but it took a real long time for superhero movies to get any kind of critical respect. It happens. And we're constantly trying to sort of evolve and realize that every genre at least has the potential to be great.
Yeah.
The Thing is actually one of the films that a lot of people point to when it's just like the critics were wrong about that one. And they were. And we're trying to make up for it now. And we'll make up for it now by saying The Thing, one of the best horror movies ever made.
Sure.
Yeah.
I like it.
I love it. Like, there's like 8 John Carpenter movies that are in like my favorite movies ever made. Like, he's one of my most favorite directors ever.
One of your most favoritist?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah, In the Mouth of Madness is still one of my favorites, even though I openly acknowledge every flaw with that movie.
All right. Okay. Let's move on.
Read another letter.
I will read another letter. Here's one about Jaws the Revenge.
Oh, boy.
This is one from Scott.
Hi, Scott.
Regarding your review of Jaws the Revenge, this is not an argument for its quality or your opinions of it, which are obviously yours, but I did want to address a specific point. People give Jaws the Revenge a lot of shit, but it's a movie with a get. Okay. As you pointed out in the first movie, the shark really doesn't act like a shark would, as a shark would. They don't attack people like this, stock boats, or, well, be gigantic. By the fourth, it's pretty clear it's supernatural, which you know plenty of movies. I would say maybe a good fourth of all movies have some element like that. And is it implausible? Yes, obviously. But so is, say, Solaris, or Persona, or Halloween, or any other movie with a supernatural element. It's a movie that dresses up in a kind of realistic setting, and with it assigning the monster shark a real species. It also lampshades this. Pretty much the entire movie plot is a giant lampshade of sharks going thousands of miles to gain revenge on physical families. But how is that different from, say, Luke Skywalker using the Force?
Okay.
Well, there is a difference because Jaws essentially takes place in the real world. But
equating all fantasy stories is a bit of a critical mistake. Because,
I do like it, though.
I remember Max Landis came out with that Superman video, and everybody loved it at the time, and it was very, very popular. And then he came out with another equally passionate video about the wrestler Triple H. And his ultimate thesis on the Triple H video was, I love this sort of saga of Triple H and how he had all these fallings out and alliances with other wrestlers, and it is a story, and isn't it great that stories are great? And I bristle at that all stories are equal because human beings tell stories. And it's okay to marvel at the fact that, going back to our very earliest days as a species, we were telling tales and we had this ancient, impossibly ancient bardic traditions. And that is exhilarating to ponder. But to say that all stories are great because they tap into that bardic tradition is a bit of a misnomer, especially from a critical perspective. It's our job to find the good stories.
Yeah, but here's
a story about a not defined, possibly supernatural shark that looks terrible and has bad special effects and bad dialogue around it, doing crappy things in a crappy shark movie. I'm going to argue that is different than Luke Skywalker using the Force.
Here's what I'm going to say. It's an issue of what I call, and I don't think I invented this. I think I heard this somewhere, and I don't know who said it first. What I call the contract with the audience. Every movie makes a contract with the audience because you go into a movie agreeing to accept a new reality.
Yeah.
Whether it's a documentary that only shows one perspective on a real thing, or it's something completely fictional like Star Wars, you go in saying, I'm willing to go along with whatever you're going to tell me. That's the contract. The movie, it starts off and it says, here's what we're about, here's the basic genre we are, here's where we take place, here's what's real and what's not. And if the movie then breaks that contract, you're allowed to cry foul.
Yeah.
But if the movie says, hey, Fast and Furious is a good example here, where those movies are theoretically they take place in the real world, but from the get-go they're fundamentally ridiculous. And so you can't complain that they're ridiculous. They're playing fair the entire way through.
How did you know that car was going to be there to break our fall?
Yeah.
That's my
one of the best lines in movie
dialogue.
history. Because people have plus 100 invincibility to cars.
Because cars don't break falls, dummy.
They're giant hunks of
They
metal.
break your skull open is what happens.
But in something like Jaws, for example, which took place in the real world for 3 movies, I mean, implausible things happened, but they were very real. By the 4th movie, when you just suddenly fucking say, by the way, this shark is more or less supernatural and it has a psychic link to the mom.
And it roars now.
By that point, the audience go, hey, wait, no, that's not what we signed up for. We signed up for Jaws 4, not Ghost Shark.
Well,
by the way, see Ghost Shark.
No.
Look up a clip from Ghost Shark. Just look at the slip and slide scene from Ghost Shark. It's incredible.
Ghost Shark. There are other better movies.
Ghost
you can
Shark
spend your
is
time
the better
on.
Sharknado.
Fair.
Can we agree with that? Okay, good.
If the film were a lot more explicit about the way it were breaking its contract with the audience, I would like it a lot more. Mm-hmm. If it were explicitly supernatural, if it
like Friday the 13th Part 6,
yeah, if
it goes nuts,
if it puked out a pirate ghost and there were like suddenly zombies,
because that's
or it grew robot arms, that would be something.
A new contract.
Yeah,
that's like this is so big, this has to be a new thing, but this is like trying to have it both ways.
And that's the problem.
And I'm coming from someone who kind of defends Jaws: The Revenge because, again, I like the protagonist, and I think there's actually like an interesting journey that they're on. But man, the plot is stupid.
Meanwhile, I think that movie's a big bucket of chum. There are some great films that break contracts, and they're great because they break contracts.
Psycho is an ideal example.
Psycho is a great example.
Changes genre halfway through the movie.
One of my favorite incidents of this is Michael Haneke's Funny Games, either version, because they do something with reality in that movie that you cannot expect, and it's just there to fuck you up.
Yep. Funny Games, which is I wrote a list once that was the 100 greatest horror movies of the 90s. And I put Funny Games at number 1, and I stand by that.
Funny Games is so great.
Funny Games is great, and it's bleak, and it's horrible.
It's a bleak, cynical, sadistic,
it's mean
home invasion film that is mean to its characters, but not quite as mean as it is to its audience.
Yeah.
It implicates you in the violence, and that is so delicious filmmaking. Anyway, I will read another letter. This one comes from Jacob.
Okay.
It says at the top, this letter is from Jacob. Good evening, Gibbs and Witney. Are you one of the Gibbs?
Sure.
Are you in the Bee Gees?
I don't know what that means.
Barry Gibbs. The Gibbs were in they were the members of the Bee Gees.
Oh, is that why?
Look up your disco history.
Is that why they were G's?
Sure.
Were the other ones like? So it was Bibbs and the Gibbs. So the B's and the G's.
Barry Gibb.
So it's BG was like his initials.
Yeah, the Bee Gees. It was Barry Gibb's band. You didn't know that?
No.
Just blew your mind right there.
I just thought it was a fun name.
The Bee Gees.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like CBGBs.
Sure.
Good evening, Gibbs and Whitney. I picked up the Criterion Leningrad Cowboys box on your recommendation.
Yay!
I loved the comedy and weirdness of the scenes of misery in pursuit of their art. My favorite being the scenes in the streets of New Orleans and the one after with the cans. Thank you for the recommendations. Keep up the good work. Now finish the episode and get some sleep, Jacob. I'm glad
it's 1:30 in the morning.
I'm really glad when we can point people in the direction of just the outre, because that's our job.
Yeah. Well, I was just having someone was talking about that old chestnut of being able to, like, why can't you just appreciate Ready Player One on its surface? And I was basically, when we say at the beginning of this podcast that we're highbrow and lowbrow, collide!
You're not going to mix in the explosion.
I might.
Oh, okay.
But when we say that, we kind of mean that. We want to treat mainstream pop entertainment with the kind of seriousness that is often reserved for art house cinema, but we also want to treat art house cinema in a way that makes it fun and accessible, because after a while, you see a lot of the same mainstream stuff over and over again. You need something new, and that's when the art house comes into your life. And changes you.
Yeah.
Because at that point, also, you're old enough and mature enough to kind of get what they're getting at with a lot of these art house movies, too.
It's also where the most interesting stuff has always been happening. If I see a film like last year I saw a film called Manifesto, where Cate Blanchett played 13 different roles, and she just enacted a series of vignettes, and in each one she monologued, and all of the dialogue, every single word of it, was taken from directly from various art and political manifestos from throughout history. And it was so fascinating, and it was so interesting. It kind of gave me a thrill that I didn't really realize I had been missing from movies. It was just so great. And now now that I've seen this, now that I've had this experience, it's my job to ensure that you, the listener, can get excited in the same way I did.
Right.
And now you're not necessarily going to get the same thrill I did, but if I can't communicate just how exhilarating it is to hear the Dogma 95 manifesto in the mouth of Cate Blanchett as she's wandering around an elementary school classroom dictating the rules to 8-year-olds, then I'm not doing my job correctly.
Well, I mean, because that's the thing. A lot of films that are, blockbuster type films, they're intended to be accessible to everybody. Like they call them 4 quadrant. Have you ever heard that term? It's a 4 quadrant movie. What that means is
the 4 quadrants are young, old, male, and female, I think.
Yeah, those are basically the breakdowns of how studios think movies are marketed. They're either marketed to young people or old people, the male audience or a female audience. Now, you can say that it's fucked up all you want, and you'd mostly be right, but that's the general idea. A 4-quadrant movie, the idea is this movie, like anyone would buy a ticket to it. There's nothing that's going to push them away. But if it's like a 1-quadrant movie, a lot of people wouldn't see it. You hear this on like the Schmodown. People are just like, I don't watch kids movies. Yeah. Well, you should. You're playing the Schmodown. You know it's going to come up. And also a lot of them are good movies. But that's true for a lot of young people who don't watch a lot of movies geared towards older people. And sometimes there's a really good reason for that. Stories told for older people or people in a different headspace. You're not there yet. You haven't had the life experiences necessary to unlock that and fully appreciate everything that's getting at yet. So that's where a critic comes along. And if you're going to watch something that is about an experience you haven't had yet, or maybe you're not necessarily ready to make the transition from one genre to another, or you've never experienced this kind of cinema before, a good critic should be able to explain that kind of movie and say, here's what you need to be looking for. Yeah. If you go in with this headspace, you might get this out of it, and it will be positive for you. Because we've all seen a movie that we just weren't ready for that day. Or, or weren't in the mood for, or didn't know what to make of, and then a year or two later you come back and it was like, oh, that was great. I just didn't appreciate it at the time.
Yeah.
Like Eyes Wide Shut's an example for me.
Okay.
When I saw Eyes Wide Shut in high school, it's a new Kubrick movie.
You were in high school. Oh, you babe.
Well, I was a senior, but still, it was a movie. It was Kubrick's last movie. Was a huge fan. Kubrick had recently died. It was released posthumously, and it was also shrouded in a lot of mystery. People didn't know what was gonna be in it, and so I saw it, and I was like, oh.
Well, I don't know what this movie's about, really.
And it wasn't,
because I'm not a married person.
I'm not a married person, or even I had never even been in like a long-term relationship in which jealousy had come up.
Yeah.
It isn't until that you've experienced jealousy and had some understanding of how consuming that negative emotion can be, and what happens when you don't deal with it well. You won't understand Eyes Wide Shut at all until you've been through that life experience. So, like, it's one of those movies. It was NC-17. Yeah, because teenagers aren't even gonna fucking get it.
Well, yeah,
it's got a lot of sex in it, but like, it's just you're not gonna understand what it's about.
Teenagers shouldn't be seeing that one. It's just it's for adults.
Yeah, because it's about adult experiences.
Not because exactly.
Not because it's kinky. It is, but like, you're not gonna understand what the fuck's going on.
Read another letter.
Okay, let's move on here. What do we got here? Okay, here's one from Daniel.
Hi, Daniel.
I have a friend who believes Tom Cruise is an awful actor, and I couldn't come up with any counterpoints as I've not seen many movies. What do you guys think about... What do you guys, I don't know if that's in general or just for Tom Cruise. Anyway, what do you guys think about Tom Cruise? Which of his films would you recommend?
Okay, if you're looking for his best performances, he has 3.
Three good performances.
The 3 best performances of his.
Sure.
Magnolia.
Sure.
Where he plays the misogynist self-help guru.
He's a men's rights activist.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. Before that was a thing.
Tropic Thunder, where he's barely recognizable. And Collateral, the Michael Mann film.
Oh, I think you're leaving out a few.
I think those are his 3 best performances. And notice he plays dicks in each one of those performances.
That's true.
Because that's like sort of his hidden talent. And the appeal of Tom Cruise is that he's really good looking. And he plays loners well because he always seems really distant from everything around him in every one of his movies.
Here's the thing with Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise he can act, and he's been really good in some performances, but he's one of the last big movie stars in that you go to see a Tom Cruise movies to see Tom Cruise be Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
And Tom Cruise's persona, aside from the fact that he's, and generally considered a very handsome man, his persona on camera is, I would use the word smug. But in some films, like, say, Top Gun or, to a different extent, Jerry Maguire, there's a charm to that. He's growing.
Yeah.
Like that's something immature. The cockiness is alluring, but he's growing out of it, and that's a good drama. But in the movies where he plays an asshole, the smugness feels like you're unlocking Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Like that smugness probably has something kind of ugly behind that. That said, I do think there's a couple exceptions. I think Jerry Maguire is a really good performance. I'm
still trying to unlock that movie.
I love that movie. I think it's really good. It's sentimental, but I think it works. Yeah. Born on the 4th of July is not that kind of performance, and he's really, really good in that movie. But yeah, Tom Cruise has spent a lot of his career not really challenging himself as an actor and doing a lot of films where he just kind of has to coast on his affability. Sometimes that's great. Like some of the Mission Impossible movies are fantastic. I'm a big fan of Night and Day. I think that movie's really funny. I like that movie a lot. He's really, really good in that.
It's a middling film.
I think it's a clever... I like Night and Day because it's basically a James Bond movie only from the perspective of the Bond girl and how annoying it is when James Bond comes into
keeps showing up.
Yeah, because like her life is normal and then this guy just keeps popping up and taking her on adventures, and it's really confusing from that perspective.
Tom Cruise is... I've always thought is an interesting mystery. And I think he has no intention and maybe not even the capacity to really give us the solution to that we're looking for. He's charming and he's handsome and he's sexy without being overtly sensual or like approachable.
Yeah.
He's steely and he's capable without seeming like heroic or tough. He is almost like the platonic ideal of a movie star because he's able to charm you and bring you in while still keeping you at kind of a distance.
Yeah.
There's a really great scene in A Few Good Men that kind of encapsulates all of
this. That's a good movie too.
Where he and Demi Moore are having a conversation, and there's a chain link fence between them. And of course, the director is trying to sort of stage how separate those characters are, but that's kind of the way Tom Cruise has always operated. He's really, really great. He's going to give you all the charm he has, but there's always going to be a fence between you. And it's only when I see him like just sort of break it down and really swing for the walls and play a dick that I feel like you can really see him.
Tom Cruise, the other thing I think Tom Cruise does really well besides being smug, good at his job. Like that's something he like Collateral. That guy is good at his job. He's always good at his job. Like, he's an a-hole, but he's good at his job. Jack Reacher is one where, in the book, I think Jack Reacher is supposed to be like 6'5", like giant.
He's this big giant Norwegian.
Tom Cruise, look it up. He's not a tall man, but you buy that he'd be good at his job. He exudes that kind of confidence, so you can get away with it.
He's 5'9". He's average height,
but he's not tall. No. Jack Reacher is actually one of his more underrated films, I think, and it works because he exudes that confidence. But then you watch something like The Mummy, the version with Tom Cruise in it, obviously, and you see where it all collapses because in The Mummy, he's playing charming smug, and he doesn't realize that the script is asshole smug.
Yeah. Well, and
you
also
just realize he doesn't. I don't think he has like a lot of introspection, in his
also
artistic craft.
The character needs to be like a guy in his like late 20s and Tom Cruise is in his 50s. And
if you're in your 50s and you're still acting like that much of a selfish asshole,
the charming rogue doesn't work when you're in your mid 50s. And so
the kind of behavior you get away with in your 20s, you can't get away with in your 50s because you're supposed to fucking know better by now. If you don't know better by now, that means basically you're fundamentally an asshole.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. What do we got?
Here is a letter from Michael. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Hey, guys. I recently just started listening to this podcast, as well as your other one, Canceled Too Soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I very much enjoy the dynamic you guys have, along with your great commentary. I listen to you guys at work, and you make my 8-hour workday go by fast, despite the podcast only being 2 to 2.5 hours long. We'd make it 8 hours if we could.
Hey, if we could do nothing but this podcast for a living,
that would be great.
Boy, I'd like to get paid. just something.
Get some scratch, get rich off this. But that's everybody's dream.
To make a living.
I recently just listened to your Herbie reviews, and when you were talking about Herbie Fully Loading, I had a childhood flashbacks of nostalgia about that movie. I was so glad to hear that you guys liked it. The reason I have such fond childhood memories about this movie is not because of my childhood love for Herbie the Love Bug, but because of my mom's deep love for Matt Dillon. Despite him not being in really much of anything. Oh, he's been in a lot.
Matt Dillon is one of those actors who's like flirted with real stardom, but he's never really in like the biggest hit movie I think he was ever in was There's Something About Mary, and he's like the third lead. He's one of those. Like he's always right on the cusp, but he's been in a lot of stuff.
My mom is obsessed with this man. In fact, she won't watch anything unless it has him in it. Needless to say, she hasn't seen many movies, but I've seen Herbie Fully Loaded plenty of times. Anyway, I feel like I've just been jabbering on for a while about Matt Dillon, so I'll end with a quick question. I've noticed that Jake Gyllenhaal... Wait a minute.
Bit of a shift,
but I've noticed that Jake Gyllenhaal is an A-list star, but his movies, for the most part, make B-movie revenue. Why do you think that is? Because it's quite a damn shame that so much talent goes underappreciated. Thanks for endless hours of entertainment, Michael. As for Matt Dillon... he works a lot, actually, and as he was
really big in the 80s.
Really big in the 80s. He was in a lot of really great indie films in the 90s. Drugstore Cowboy is really terrific. But
Oscar nominated for Crash, and he's good in Crash.
He's good in Crash.
I don't like that movie, but he's good in it.
There's one moment with Sandra Bullock that I think is really great about Crash, and you can just watch that scene and get everything you need.
Okay.
Just don't watch the rest of the movie. As for Jake Gyllenhaal, he is an actor. He's not a movie star.
He's so attractive, people treat him like
he's one of those many, and this has happened to many actors and actresses, where they're young and they're very physically attractive, and they're really charismatic, and they have a lot of screen chemistry with every one of their fellow actors, and studios instantly make the mistake of making them into leading men.
Example, Colin Farrell.
Colin Farrell is the example of
Colin
this.
Farrell started
Brad Pitt is another one.
I think Brad Pitt pulled it off a little better than most.
Brad Pitt could kind of pull it off, but it's not until you see him in 12 Monkeys you really realize, oh wait, he's kind of a character actor.
That's the thing. Some people are character actors, but they're so damned attractive.
Johnny Depp is another one.
People want to shove him into really generic product, thinking, oh, well, they'll just be charming and they'll get through it, but they don't have enough to work with. Jake Gyllenhaal's a really good actor. Look at Nightcrawler sometime. He's fantastic. But I've interviewed Jake Gyllenhaal a couple of times, and let me tell you something. He has the most gorgeous eyes of any person. Like, they look like they have, like, that, that universe on the Cat's Collar and Men in Black? Like, that's what they look like. He's really magnetic.
There are a lot of movie stars where, like, they're charming on screen, but you get in a room with them and you realize, oh, of course you want to point a camera at this person.
This is why they can nail all the auditions. Yeah. And
like, when I met Wesley Snipes, it's like, I just walked in the room, he's just sitting there. He's just, like, he's having a snack. I'm interviewing this guy. And it's like, oh, hello, Wesley. Like, you are somehow the most attractive person I've ever seen in the world right now.
There is a definite charisma. Yeah. And that's something Jake Gyllenhaal has. But he's also a really, really good actor. But you're right. Sometimes you look at them like, God, they keep making starring in these movies, and the movies keep not being huge hits. What's going on? There's a couple of reasons for that. Sometimes
Jake Gyllenhaal doesn't necessarily want that.
True, but you do start to wonder, why do they keep giving him big roles in big movies if he's not a big box office draw? And there are a couple of reasons for that. Sometimes the studios or the filmmakers are aware of how talented they are, and they realize it's only a matter of time before they break out. Richard Gere is an example of this. When you look at the early films of Richard Gere, he was in a lot of good movies, but they weren't like big hits, but they kept waiting because they knew eventually he was going to be in American Gigolo or An Officer and the Gentleman, and those are going to be big hits. But early on, Days of Heaven, great movie, wasn't a huge smash. They kept waiting because they knew he had something.
Yeah.
The other thing is, people often like working with people. Like Freddie Prinze Jr., for example. I've never heard anyone say an unkind word about him as a person. His movies, yeah, he's made a lot of bad movies. But you're just like, God, he's in all these fucking movies. They're not big hits. Why do people keep working with Freddie Prinze Jr.? Apparently because people liked working with Freddie Prinze Jr. So as long as they could work with him, they did. That makes sense. Film is a collaborative medium.
And yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal gets really deep in his roles. He loves to physically torture himself. And this is something that Johnny Depp also liked to do. In that he was...
Or Christian Bale is another example.
The case of Johnny Depp was that he was so handsome as a young man. He was in 21 Jump Street, and they kept trying to give him these sort of dreamboat roles and these lover roles just because he's such a good-looking guy. And he hated that to the he hated his own look so much that it took something like Edward Scissorhands, where he played a pale, scarred robot ghoul that was also romantic.
Yeah.
That kind of let him realize he could break out of that. And you realize that he tends to play a lot of like freaks and weirdos in movies. He works with Tim Burton a lot because he's constantly railing against that early portion of his career where they kept saying, oh, you're a leading man. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, I'm a leading man, but I'm going to play Willy Wonka as if he's Carol Channing mixed with Michael Jackson. Is that okay?
Yeah.
No. Well, I'm going to do it anyway because that's what I want to do.
And Colin Farrell's another example of this. Yeah. He made a great independent movie, or at least really low budget movie called Tigerland.
Yeah,
which is
it's a Schumacher.
It's a Schumacher film. It's one of Joel Schumacher's best films, and which is actually saying something. He's made some good movies. He's really hit or miss though. But Tigerland's one of the good ones, and he's magnetic in that movie. You can tell like, oh my God, he's going to be a star. And then Hollywood's like, oh shit, let's put him in shit. What are we going to put him in? The Recruit.
Or SWAT.
Yeah, and there's all these movies that just ask him to do nothing, and he doesn't have personality devoid of context the way that Tom Cruise does, for example. You give him a character and he'll chew it up like In Bruges. He's really fun in Bruges.
I loved him in Daredevil.
He's great in Daredevil. It's a bad movie, but he's good in it.
I'm the one defender of Daredevil
because he's a character actor. So like you give him even in some like what's a great remake? Fright Night. That's a good remake. I love the original Fright Night. Part of me likes the remake even more, just because there's really great performances in the remake.
It's nowhere near the original.
But like he's like the best part of Saving Mr. Banks, for God's sake. Like he's just, you give him like a supporting role of which is like just a little meat on it, and he'll get the protein.
He'll blow you away.
He'll be great. So yeah. Anyway, I digress. That's Jake Gyllenhaal.
Okay. Here's a letter from Aaron. Dear Bibbs and Whitney, I loved your discussion regarding Space Jam and New Nightmare. That being said, I wanted to pass along a fun fact regarding New Nightmare. In the documentary Never Sleep Again, it is revealed that there were 2 Rex props, that's the doll that the young boy has, that was attacked by Freddy and was sewn up.
Yeah, and supposedly the Rex doll was like protecting him from Freddy in his dreams.
Yeah, it was revealed that there were 2 Rex props made for the film. One was given to Miko Hughes, the young actor, after filming, and the other to Wes Craven himself. He stated that seeing Rex always tugged at his heart. I thought it was fun and wanted to share.
That's lovely. Okay, I like that. I always like finding out where props ended up.
You should visit Miko Hughes' website these days because it is freaking terrifying. And by design. Miko Hughes is an adult who, I don't think he's working much anymore, but as a child he worked a lot. He was in Pet Sematary, he was in New Nightmare. And he has assembled this really creepy collage. It might not even be up anymore, but he constructed this creepy collage where it's, like a photo collage of him throughout his various roles and him growing up and him a little bit older. But over it all is a gigantic yellow shining sun with his own childhood face in the middle of it.
It's really weird.
Yeah, it's like really terrifying, and you can tell he's kind of goofing on himself a little bit.
All right, here's another letter from. I think this is the first letter from what? Here's a letter from Lindsay.
Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, Bibbs and Witney. My name is Lindsay. I'm a big fan of both your podcasts, as you are two of my favorite critics right now. Thank you very much. I was going over some of my recent Letterboxd reviews when I had a thought that might be pertinent to your show. In the same week, I watched 2 movies and had wildly different experiences with them. The first movie was Mother. I rated the quality of the movie very highly, but found the experience of watching it to be rather dreadful. Whenever anything reminds me of the last 30 minutes of the movie, I still get really bummed out. The second movie I watched was Death Spa. Good for you.
That is a good double feature.
I rated this one very poorly, but I had an amazingly fun time watching it. Thinking about that movie just makes me smile. So I guess I was wondering, how much does your personal enjoyment of a movie factor into your overall rating? Do you ever find yourself watching a movie and thinking, this is such a good movie and I hope I never have to watch it again? The answer to that last part is yes. There are some really brilliant movies out there that are very depressing. I know a lot of people who listen to depressing music when they're depressed and they find that cathartic. They feel like, oh, they're not alone. There are other people out there who feel this thing, or it allows them to tap into emotions they might otherwise be fighting. That's not me. When I am feeling down, I want to feel better. That's how my brain works. So although I can watch a film like, for example, Michael Haneke's Amour, which is one of the most depressing movies ever made, if you ask me.
And strangely, one of Haneke's warmest.
It is, but it's also incredibly depressing. And
the second time Haneke's come up on this episode.
Fair enough. I admire everything about that movie. I don't want to sit through it again. I would tell someone else that it's worth seeing, but I would also warn them it's a bummer.
Yeah.
So you have to be ready for it when the time comes.
I'd really have to push myself to sit through Lars von Trier's Antichrist a second time.
There you go.
And I have plenty to say about Antichrist, but yeah, Collider, not a fun one to sit through.
Collider has this really nice, really classy series of videos that they're doing where they're doing these long ranked lists of movies. Like they did the top 50 superhero movies, and right now they're doing the top 10 Steven Spielberg movies. And I was just having a conversation on the Schmillville fan page about I think I don't have it in front of me, but I think Schindler's List ranked 6 or 7, not in the top 5.
That's not high enough.
Arguably, it's a tough. The top 10 on Spielberg is a tough list, if you ask me, especially the top 5. But regardless, people were like, "Is that right?" And one of the things people brought up as sort of I can see why is the idea of rewatchability. I'll rewatch Jurassic Park and Raiders of the Lost Ark many times throughout my life. I won't do that with Schindler's List. And the point that I brought up, and I think it applies in this context, is you'll want to see Raiders of the Lost Ark over and over again. Schindler's List, you might only need to see once because it will brand itself into your brain.
It got the job done.
And that's the kind of impact it has. It's so heavy, but so good that you might rewatch it again because it's a great movie. But you don't need to because it was so effective. And I think that's a different kind of
gauge.
quality.
Yeah.
As for the other thing about is it bad but we enjoy it, I try to be honest about it. That's the only solution I think we can have.
I've come out in voracious defense of the notion of the guilty pleasure. And I think because there is definitely a divide between the standard you can hold a film to and your enjoyment of it. You can see a great film and not necessarily be personally very deeply moved by it. And as a critic, you have to say that. And you can say, a lot of people when I first saw The Thin Red Line, for instance, that was my first Malick. I wasn't familiar with Terrence Malick. I didn't know what I was getting into yet.
Yeah.
So I was
that must have been really weird.
I was a little lost. This was my first exposure to this type of filmmaking. Who's whispering? Kind of what are we going?
Poetry.
What's the story moving forward here? And this was in a mainstream theater, and it was the same year as Saving Private Ryan. It
was a big deal when it came out.
Yeah, it's what? This photography is beautiful, but I'm not really sure. But I knew something important was happening. There was enough happening in there that I could kind of absorb that something, there was some great filmmaking going on, even though I was completely lost. So in that sense, I could recognize that this is a great film that I'm clearly not responding to.
Okay.
By that same token, I went to see that animated film Sing, with the singing animals, and they put on a singing competition, and it's just commercial pablum and for little kids, and it's totally forgettable. and I can recognize that there's not a lot of technical grandiosity or great performance going into this pretty plain movie. And I left in the best possible mood.
Sure.
I felt like I had seen a Muppets movie, and it was just, I'm leaving, and I'm just lighter in my step, and it really just improved the way I felt. So if you do get a really great thrill from a film you know to be bad, it's okay to call that a guilty pleasure, and it is okay to feel a little bit embarrassed by the fact that you actually got a personal charge from a film that you can personally recognize that it does not meet your or anybody's standards for quality.
We actually differ on this point. There's some sort of critical school of thought or disagreement about the idea of a guilty pleasure and should you even have them. Yeah. I think you articulated your point very well. I understand that viewpoint, but for me, as a critic, however I feel about a movie is my responsibility to articulate that. Yeah. And I think it's important to articulate that honestly. And if I like something, if I enjoy watching it, there's a reason why I enjoyed it. And even though there might be elements of the craft that are weak, and I think you have to acknowledge that when that's the case, I think it's important to say, but it had a positive effect, and here's how it did that. So I generally don't feel very guilty about liking anything that I enjoy. But, there's a lot of... Death Spa is a really good example here. If you haven't seen Death Spa...
Death Spa's spectacular.
Death Spa's great. See, there you go. I'm calling it great, but it's very stupid.
No, I wouldn't call it a great film, but I'd say it's great.
There you go. That's a good divide.
It is by no means a great film. Yeah. In fact, it's a piece of crap. But it's great.
Death Spa is about a health spa, and this is made during the health spa craze of the 80s, and it is about a health spa that is really futuristic. It's so futuristic that everything in the health spa is computer operated, but then the computer gets haunted.
The computer gets possessed by a ghost, and the computer ghost combination starts killing things, and bonkers stuff happens.
But sometimes
somebody's locked in a freezer and the fish come to life for no good reason.
Sometimes it makes sense. I get that this equipment would collapse and kill somebody because it broke. But sometimes it's why are the wall tiles in the shower computerized?
Yeah.
Why did you need to hook those up to the computer? It doesn't make any sense.
How does the computer get inside those fish that come to life?
There's a whole bunch of movies of that vein. Many of them involving killer spas. I'm a big fan of Aerobicide, sometimes known as Killer Workout. If you love Death Spa, you should totally track down that one because I almost like that one better. It's also super crazy.
I think it's on Blu-ray now, and
really?
It's under the title Killer Workout.
That's great. Or Killer Party, which came out the same year, which is also insane.
I haven't seen Killer Party. It's a hole in my B-movies education.
Killer Party is one of the I think there were multiple horror movies set during April Fool's Day that came out in 1986. There's 3 of them, and that's actually my favorite one.
All right, not April Fool's Day.
I actually don't like April Fool's Day very much. It's okay. It doesn't really blow my mind, and I think the trickery of it is kind of bland. I think Killer Party is the way to go. But I digress. Anyway, I know that those films are stupid. I also know that they're not trying to be smart. So again, it's a contract with the audience.
But how do you know that? Maybe the filmmakers were really trying to put together something very earnest.
Once you put Paul Bartel in your movie...
Okay, fair. With Mary Warrenoff as the sass-talking lunch lady or something.
Yeah, there's an awareness there. There's a playfulness there. I think you can usually tell when they're being intentionally silly or not. I digress. Moving on.
Here's a letter from Jeff. Hi, Jeff. Hello, Bibbs and Whitney. First time, long time. On the most recent episode, this was written a while back, you guys brought up commentary tracks, and it reminded me how much I was into listening to commentary tracks on my favorite movies and TV series, especially on comedies. I've always been a huge fan of comedians, and to hear them in a casual conversation just trying to crack each other up was sometimes funnier than the movie. Some of my favorites being the Anchorman cast, anything by Judd Apatow, or the Frat Pack. Community, How I Met Your Mother, and Reno 911 do great commentary tracks for TV. but the best commentary ever is for Tropic Thunder. In the movie, Kirk Lazarus / Sergeant Osiris says, "I don't drop character till I've done the DVD commentary." So while recording the commentary for the film, Robert Downey Jr. actually spends the entire commentary in character. It's pretty underrated.
Okay, I actually didn't know that. That's funny.
It's hilarious and committed meta joke performances ever. I mean, how is this not a legendary Hollywood story? My first intent was for the question to be about my favorite commentary tracks, but now I'm really interested in hearing about Hollywood legendary stories. Anyway, some that come to mind for me are Andy Kaufman and his characters. He lived who he was. Joaquin Phoenix going crazy, but actually promoting I'm Still Here. Those are pretty well known. I was just wondering if there are other meta stories like that have piqued your interest. Thanks for all the content. You keep talking. I'll keep listening. Jeff.
I mean, you touched on some of the good ones. Yeah. Andy Kaufman, of course, stayed in character and also stayed in other characters.
Yeah,
throughout a lot of his career. Some of which he never got broken until the movie Man in the Moon came out.
I really love the J.T. Leroy scandal. That was really great.
That was very weird.
It was very weird. J.T. Leroy wrote a series of articles about his really horrible upbringing, about how he was just like sexually abused and raised in complete destitution, and was now this kind of shy, really reclusive, just personality that somehow managed to crack into the Hollywood elite and was being invited to all of these Hollywood parties. And there are all these really kind of not very good pictures of J.T. Leroy hanging around with really, really famous people. And now that we know the truth about J.T. Leroy, i.e. J.T. Leroy isn't a person, that it was all a hoax made up by another author, and that the person that we saw J.T. Leroy was actually that author's sister in drag going to all of these parties, makes it really fascinating. It makes you wonder how much the Hollywood community was really aware of what was going on. Surely somebody had to be in on this scandal. At the time that the news broke, Asia Argento had made a film based on J.T. Leroy's life called The Heart is Deceitful Above All Things. It's a pretty twisted movie. It's pretty good. It has the Sprouse twins in it from, I think it's The Sweet Life with Zack and Cody, one of those Disney Kid TV series. And on the big posters, for the longest time in the advertising, said based on a true story.
Yeah.
And when the scandal broke, they just X'd out the word true on all of the posters. And because
based
it was
on a story.
Based on a story,
clever,
yeah. So and because it was kind of an arty, kind of self-aware film anyway, it really actually played into that film.
One of my favorite, like a lot of people are sort of enamored of the idea of method acting. And some people do it great, and some people don't. You want to watch a fun movie about it, actually, My Weekend with Marilyn. Is actually kind of fun. It stars Kenneth Branagh as Sir Laurence Olivier.
I haven't seen that one.
It's good.
And it's Michelle Williams plays Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, she's fantastic in it. It's one of those biographies where you have all these wonderful characters. You have Laurence Olivier, you have Vivian Leigh, you have Marilyn Monroe, and it's about this other guy. I don't care about that guy. That guy is boring as toast. I want these people, and all the scenes with them are really, 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 really great. It's about this movie that they did. Oh God, what was it? Hold on, I want to make sure I remember the name right. Marilyn Monroe, Laurence.
The one they were in together.
Yeah. Okay. So what happened was Laurence Olivier, who is considered one of the great actors and directors, honestly, and a very classical actor in a lot of ways. He was trying to be more culturally relevant.
Yeah.
Make a story more for, just show that he wasn't snooty, basically. And he made a movie called The Prince and the Showgirl, which is a cute romantic comedy in which basically falls in love with Marilyn Monroe. And about a large part of the movie is about him dealing with Marilyn Monroe, who was trying to be a serious method actor. And they clashed so much on the set, and he hated the experience of working with her because everything had to be just so, and wait, what's my motivation? And he doesn't care. And then there's a great scene where he's watching the dailies, and he's just like, oh, that's what she was doing. She's fantastic. She's really, really great. A lot of the great stories about method acting are about sort of the clash between the old school British theatrical acting and which
is very by rote and very theatrical and very gesture oriented, I suppose.
And this sort of newer school of younger actors who are trying to stay in character all the time and figure out what did they have to eat today. there's a story, apparently it's somewhat apocryphal, of Laurence Olivier working with Dustin Hoffman on Marathon Man, where Dustin Hoffman had been up for 2 days, allegedly because his character had been up for 2 days. And Laurence Olivier just said, have you tried acting? You don't have to do this to yourself, man. Anthony Hopkins, I was at UCLA film school, and I was leaving school, and there was a little theater they have at UCLA, on the film school campus, where they would sometimes show movies at night, and they would show old, Tarkovsky movies or whatever. And I saw this huge line out for it, and I was as I didn't know what was going on, I said, hey, what's going on? I was tired. And I was like, what's going on? It's they're showing Remains of the Day. And I'm like, and there's this much of a line? And they said, well, Anthony Hopkins is going to be here. So I got in that line. And I'm so glad I did, because he stayed around and talked for an hour afterwards. And he told stories about working with Laurence Olivier. And one of the things he talked about was, this was at an early point in his career when he was trying to be method, and it was tripping him up, and he had to kind of abandon it. Because he was doing a play, and he said, I was off on the wings, and I missed my cue because I was trying to get into character, and it was Anthony, get out here! It's wait, where am I coming from? The wings! Just get on the stage! Just say your line!
Yeah.
So
I studied method for a semester. I fancied myself an actor in college, and they always had that sort of moments, even where they said, Stanislavski's great. Study the method. Feel what the character's feeling. But if you're on stage and you're, breaking down and having this emotional moment and you're crying, you also have to be able to make sure that the audience can understand what you're saying. And there was, incident after incident about these people who were breaking down crying on stage, and they were, really feeling the moment and actually giving, the performance of their lifetime, but nobody can understand their lines. So there's a practical element that can never be overlooked.
Yeah. All right. We got time for a few more. Let's do a few more.
Let's do a few more. Here's a letter from Hayden. Hello, Hayden.
Hi.
Hello. I feel like this letter will be redundant and might end up being too long, but what the hell? It's not too long, don't worry. Watching The Shape of Water win Best Picture and seeing Guillermo del Toro win Best Director truly moved me. This isn't just because I love the film, it's because this shows a film like The Shape of Water could win Best Picture and Best Director. For what seems like my entire life, I wanted to make movies. And recently I learned I want to make movies like The Shape of Water. Even though films like The Post and Phantom Thread are great pieces of cinema, those aren't the types of films I'm driven to make. And those films are in many ways obvious Oscar winners. I wouldn't say that about Phantom Thread. But
Phantom Thread, well,
Phantom Thread's
it won an Oscar.
Bizarre movie. Yeah, I guess so. Those aren't the types of films I'm driven to make, and those aren't the films that are two obvious Oscar winners. I'm driven to make films that are similar to Get Out or The Shape of Water. Well, I'm not sure if those are similar films.
They're horror movies.
I suppose so. You can call The Shape of Water a horror movie.
It's horror.
It's got a monster. Yeah, it's horror adjacent.
It's horror. It wouldn't exist without the existence of the horror genre.
Yeah. If The Shape of Water came out 10 years ago, it would not have won Best Picture.
Definitely.
Was The Shape of Water the best picture of 2017? Quick answer, no. Who the hell knows and who cares? All I know
apparently
is
Witney does.
The more than ever, I want to create art and feel inspired, and isn't that what movies are all about? Sorry if this letter isn't the greatest. I'm writing in a cloud of excitement and emotion.
I forget who it was, but someone once said, the trick to writing, making art, is to make what you want to see.
Kevin Smith said that.
Just make the movie you haven't seen yet.
That was the question he got most often from, usually as a young college-age audience trying to break into the industry. And it's do you have any advice for young screenwriters? And that was always what he said. Make the film you want to see.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is, how crazy it is. Don't think about us trying to sell it yet.
Yeah. Don't think about what's hot now.
Yeah, that'll come later. You'll have to hone that skill eventually, but don't do that when you're just starting.
Right.
Make the film you want to see, because if you're passionate enough about it, no matter how strange it is, somebody's going to respond to that passion. And if you want to see it, chances are somebody else wants to see it too.
And if you're thinking about that and thinking to yourself, oh, that sounds so romantic, I don't buy it. I want to be practical and make something that will sell. Think of it this way. The way Hollywood works is you come up with an idea, you write a screenplay. If you're lucky, it gets made in 3 or 4 years. By that point, the trend is over.
Yeah.
You would better either start a new trend or just make something that'll work at any time because it's good. So focus on it being good. If you have a story you want to tell that story. You have a painting you want to paint, paint that painting. Don't let anyone else tell you to do it unless you're working on commission, in which case you signed a contract.
Yeah. Well, that's
the rule.
There's that.
On some level, sometimes you just have to make the thing. But if it's for you, make your thing, man. And then and the world will be a better place for it. Honestly, usually.
Well, provided you do it well.
Well,
enough.
your life will be better for it because you created something, and you'll be able to feel pride.
And it'll also help you like hone your voice a little bit better if you're dealing with your own language.
I was was it J. Michael Straczynski who said this, or at least he said it when I heard it. Every writer has 1,000 bad pages in them.
Get them out of the way first.
Yeah, write them first. You're going to write a lot of bad stuff before you write anything good. So, don't be afraid of making those mistakes. Those mistakes is knowing the mistakes you made earlier will help you not make those mistakes later. You can't jump ahead like that too easily, or at least almost no one can.
Another good. The worst vice is advice. But another good word that sort of guided me as an author was you are going to write something that you fall in love with that sucks.
Yep.
You are going to make something that sucks, and you're going to fall in love with it, and you're going to cling to it. You're going to show it to people. You're going to ask for validation, and you're not going to get it.
Sometimes.
Because that thing might stink, and you have to kind of contend with that. Mm-hmm. You have to understand that what you make, no matter how much you love it, may not necessarily be great, and you have to learn to start to recognize what it is you're passionate about, and you have to learn to sort of hone your craft within that.
And yet at the same time,
balance your passion and your craft.
And yet at the same time, you do have to balance that with sometimes people don't know what you're doing yet.
Yeah.
They might not be on the right wavelength. Think about a lot of people turned down Harry Potter. Like the book.
Oh, okay.
Like a lot of publishers said, we don't care.
Okay.
Like, people don't necessarily know what they got. So you just got to keep trying.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's do it. This is an email from Philip.
Hi, Philip.
Hi, Bibbs and Whitney. My name is Philip, and I am a longtime listener from Sweden. You're my favorite podcast on the Schmoes Known Network. Thank you very much. And I also listen to every episode of Canceled Too Soon. Thank you for that as well.
Thank you for that.
One of my favorite moments from the Oscars this past week, well, it's been a while, was finally seeing Roger Deakins take home his Best Cinematography Oscar for Blade Runner 2049, which was shot digitally.
After 600,000 nominations.
Basically. I then found out that the previous 9 winners of that award, only 3 of them, There Will Be Blood, Inception, and La La Land, were shot on film. As someone who is just now getting into studying filmmaking, the debate of shooting a movie on celluloid versus digital really fascinates me. What are your opinions on this debate, and how much longer do you think it will be before film completely disappears? I have, for the past few years, preferred shooting on digital myself, both on an aesthetic and on a practical level, but I still think the option to shoot on film should be available to the people who prefer it. However, I fear that celluloid will soon go to the way of the dodo bird. Thanks, and keep up the great work. The age-old question.
The age-old... Well, here's a little bit of rest to the debate. Film is dead. It is only a few fetishists who are keeping it alive. And
specifically Christopher Nolan, Paul Thomas Anderson, and Quentin Tarantino.
Just those 3. They are the ones who are still ringing the bell. There were some filmmakers who were ringing the bell for a while and ended up folding, like Scorsese, for instance, was like, no, film. Okay, fine, I'll try digital. David Lynch very actively gave up on film despite what he could do with it. He's made some of the most beautifully photographed movies I've ever seen. Lost Highway is one of the most gorgeous, like everything's black in Lost Highway, and yet it's still gorgeous to look at. And yet he says that it's just a dinosaur. It's too slow-moving a machine. It can't keep up with his imagination. And you look at something like Inland Empire. Inland Empire looks like ass. It's shot on these really cheap consumer-grade digital cameras, and yet it still has that Lynchian flair. And you can tell that he's really kind of stretching for the first, and as it turns out, very last time.
Well, Twin Peaks, but that was...
Twin Peaks. Okay, that was fair. Twin Peaks.
But
digital film has evolved to the point where you can do almost anything you could do with film with digital. Almost.
Yeah, I still think in a lot of aesthetic purposes, 70 millimeter is
70 millimeter is still the very top.
But here's the thing, though, because the debate about digital versus film has shifted. And initially, when people started making digital-only movies in the late 90s... the difference between film and digital from a quality perspective was abundantly obvious. Even like the most technically proficient, advanced digital camera still looked a lot worse than film. There's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not going to bore you with all of them. Like one of the problems is they didn't handle the color black very well. They kept wanting to put information in the negative space.
Yeah, it looked like it was static in there.
Yeah, it was really weird.
Star Wars Attack of the Clones was the one that was just the most glaringly obvious for so many people.
Public Enemies with the Michael Mann movie, which people like thought like, this is wrong. It looks so digital and it's a period piece and it really ruins the period aesthetic.
Yeah.
And there's an argument to be made for that. I'm not going to lie. Michael Mann was also an early adopter of digital. But the thing is that the reason why film, and a lot of people like you and me even initially were like film all the way, was considered superior to digital, even though digital was faster and more convenient, was because artistically, aesthetically, the difference was so obviously in film's favor.
Yeah.
Now, the difference is at worst negligible most of the time. And as a result, even though there are things we might like and miss about the film aesthetic, from a practical perspective, at some point we just need to make the fucking movie. Yeah, and so I've really turned a corner. I still think film is incredible, and I still think it needs to be used a lot of the time for archival purposes,
which it is.
Which it is.
Studios still make physical prints of most of their movies and store them in a salt mine in Kansas, or a cave in Kansas somewhere.
A lot of people say that like, oh, it's going to be so much easier to save things on digital. Yes and no. On one hand, they take up less space. On the other hand, formats change
really rapidly.
Yeah, when you have a physical copy,
you can lose information way more easily than you can lose like a physical print.
Yeah, like an electromagnetic pulse could wipe out an entire library. Good thing we have a print. So there's a reason why, for archival purposes, a lot of people still really believe in film. But from a practical perspective of just shooting the damn movie, digital is fine. I've turned a corner on it. I've had to realize that things have changed and digital is fine.
The access to the movie is the important thing. I really was like gung ho. I was digging my heels in on film. It's like, no, I will not see digital. I'll see film if I can. And after a while, I just couldn't see film. But
I work with film, like actual film,
and I realized that if a young person is going to come upon, a great like Casablanca for the first time, who cares if they're seeing a digital projection? I saw it on VHS. I saw it on VHS for the first time. The first several times I saw Casablanca. I was raised on VHS. Everyone says, crappy quality VHS. I don't want to talk about a videotape. Nobody even talks about videotapes. Not even hipsters talk about videotapes anymore.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm starting to see that a little bit. A little romanticization for VHS.
But I guess the hipsters and sort of like off in the fringe. But it doesn't matter that I saw it on VHS. I still got to see Casablanca. It didn't have to be on 70mm film in an impeccable print for me to enjoy and appreciate that movie. So the tech is less relevant. That said, I work with film every day. I processed a bunch of 16mm tonight, and there's a lot of really fascinating formats and things that can be done with film that just haven't been able to be grabbed with any sort of digital camera.
Well, and I think
one superior than the other? It depends on what you're trying to do, and you just need access to the right tool for the right job.
And that's kind of my whole point, really, which is basically every tool should be in the toolbox. Especially technologically, and that's something that the film industry has a tendency to do. We invented synchronized sound. We'll throw all the silent filmmaking equipment away. We don't need it anymore. I'm like, well, it still worked.
Yeah,
like you could still make a good movie with that. Like you don't need to. Okay, fine. I guess we're throwing it all fucking away. You don't need to throw anything away. It should always be a possibility, and it would really kill me if I found out that literally we're never making film again, like celluloid, like it's always gone. Because I think it does have some aesthetic value, but like from a practical perspective, I understand why we've mostly gone to digital. It is more convenient and almost or as good.
Well, as long as Nolan, Anderson, and Tarantino are working, we're still going to have at least somebody carrying the torch. Okay. Something David Cronenberg noticed is that older filmmakers, who have been making movies for a while, David Lynch, Scorsese himself even, liked the digital tools because it gave them the speed and the ease of access that they always wanted early in their careers. Whereas younger filmmakers who are just starting up have such a keen sense of history that they want the old machines. They want to give themselves that challenge. One final word. Digital cameras are small. Mm-hmm. It changed the language of cinema in a really dramatic way.
Yep.
Everything was handheld for a whole decade because the cameras were now smaller and could be moved anywhere. And that made for a visual kind of chaos that I wasn't prepared for and responded very negatively to, and which we still haven't grown out of.
Well, I think,
especially when it comes to like action movies and fast-paced movies.
Well, I think it goes beyond that. I think that's true, because now you can put cameras where you couldn't before.
Yeah.
You can get
carry
shots,
them into the action now. Yeah.
And sometimes that's great, and sometimes it's not. When you only had enough time to get so many setups a day, you had to really make sure that they were very, very carefully chosen. You chose the angle. You made sure that they were perfect because you were only going to get so many.
You had to commit to a decision. You couldn't just shoot and choose later.
And now you can. And as a result, a lot of people are shooting a little bit more chaotically, not just in terms of the actual shots that they're getting, but the amount of coverage that they're getting, and they don't actually need to. And that's one of the dangers of digital, is that you don't have
so much coverage, they're editing them more than they would otherwise.
They feel like they have to use every shot. So as a result, we do, every time you make an adjustment like that, every time you change into a new technology or a new format, you gain things and you lose other things, and hopefully you gain more than you lose, and you have to sort of compensate for that a bit. And so, younger filmmakers now, they don't necessarily need the discipline that older filmmakers had to go through, and that's something that they should probably be cognizant of and trying to make sure that they keep in mind the importance of discipline.
Yeah.
So that's that's my last thought on that.
Okay. Here's a letter from Jin. Hello, William Whitney. It's Jin, but from Japan this time. Jin has previously written in from other nations.
Cool.
I recently relocated. Since I am in Japan, the sort of horror central of East Asia, I had a question about the horror genre. I know I'm kind of asking the wrong crowd, seeing as you're both horror fanatics, but is watching horror films important to understanding cinema? I get the basic reasons why it's important. It's one of the best genres of showcasing and what cinema can do, combining visual sounds, aesthetics to create a primal, unnerving feeling. But I'm too much of a scaredy cat to actually watch a horror film, especially by myself. I just get jumpy. Can't I substitute similar feelings from a thriller instead?
That's an interesting point. I hadn't. To answer your first question, I think horror is very vital to the cinematic medium. I think when you look at something like a drama film, they're trying to sort of approximate reality and try to create emotional and intellectual conversations. When you look at something like horror, for example, you're trying to create something purely visceral, something dreamlike, something that really hits you in the gut. Yeah. And there's something very pure about that sort of art form. Does it sometimes lack the depth that people associate with great cinema? Sometimes. Sometimes it's all in there, man. Like The Exorcist is deep. But like sometimes, you just have these things that are just purely visceral, and that's all they need to be, and that's what they're good at, and that is fantastic. So yeah, I think horror is super valuable, and I think it's something that needs to be researched. But the distinction between a horror movie and a thriller is something that has come up actually quite a bit, like recently, in terms of the movie trivia Schmodown, because they used to like share a pie slice, and I don't think they do anymore. And for me, what it boils down to is, and a lot of people have that, is this horror or is it a thriller? Is Get Out a horror movie?
Yes.
Well, yes, but here's the distinction for me. A horror movie is fundamentally about fear.
Yeah.
The emotion of fear, evoking fear. A thriller can have that, but generally speaking, it's more about suspense, which is a type of fear, but it's more about anticipation than it is about a phobia.
Yeah.
So something like North by Northwest can be a thriller. It's not scary. You might feel like a lot of suspense. Oh, God, will they fall off Mount Rushmore? But you're not going to lose sleep that night.
Yeah.
Something like Get Out is about real horrifying things that happen in the world, and it's about confronting extreme anxiety and giving the audience a place to experience anxiety where they are safe and they can hopefully process things in an artistic way.
When you talk about fear, you talk about something that's fundamental to us. You're talking about a part of the universal human psyche.
H.P. Lovecraft wrote the oldest emotion in mankind is fear.
And fear of the unknown, right?
Yeah.
a horror movie is about death. A thriller is about survival.
That's a great way to put it.
We all, we fear being killed and a monster being killed. There's an easy way to get that. A monster is chasing you with a knife and it'll rend you and make you feel pain and then you die, and that's something to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
A suspense film, they always live.
Yeah, there's gray areas
or
in both.
Or
there
they
are horror
or
movies
they
where people live, and there's thrillers where people die. But it's all about, I hope they get out of this. And the horror movie there's a very real probability that they won't.
Yeah. So I think horror films have always been very brazen, just as a genre, about confronting not just human fears, but specifically dying, being killed. Mm-hmm. All of those things you hear about in Metallica songs. Or
if not literally being killed, then having something happen that to you would be as bad.
Yeah, and
something that catastrophic.
And there's a little bit of a gray area because, as you grow older, your fears change. Sure. And is your fear of death going to be linked to something that a parent might be afraid of? Mm-hmm. Like Rosemary's Baby. If you're a parent, that movie is terrifying.
If you don't have kids, or if you've never been around pregnant people, let's say you're the youngest person in your family, you're like the youngest child, as I was. Rosemary's Baby didn't hit me very hard until I was older and I actually knew pregnant women. Then that's when I realized, everything about this is going on. I totally get this now. This is fucking terrifying. Yeah.
And then you get into films that are just sort of about sort of family drama and the breakdown of the family dynamic. A father dies, for instance. There's a really great Iranian film called Under the Shadow, which is about an absent father and how it sort of lingers. A present, like his haunted presence, lingers in her house. Mm-hmm. I love that movie. And I think a younger person who's never sort of had to worry about the work it takes to maintain domesticity is going to really understand a film like that.
Yeah.
And so they might classify that as a thriller, even though there's like supernatural elements in there.
Fear is very personal.
Yeah.
A lot of things are very personal, and movies will hit people very differently. I think a lot of people can understand drama and appreciate it, whether or not they can personally relate to it. But when it comes down to a horror movie, you hear a lot of people say that's not a horror movie because I wasn't scared. It's not always about your phobia. It's the idea that it is dealing with phobia. And I'm not talking about like, generally speaking, I'd prefer not to fall off a building. There's a difference between that and having a genuine fear of heights. Because to you, heights are the thing that could kill you. So, long story short, I don't think you're going to... If you focus on thrillers, you're going to find some that overlap, certainly. Silence of the Lambs is a good example. But for the most part, you're not going to get the same thing out of it. And if you're really studying art, there's going to come a time, whether you like it or not, when you're going to have to confront some art that challenges you or makes you uncomfortable. I spoke about it recently. I don't like films like that make me super depressed. I don't seek them out. I see them, usually for work because I need to write about them. But for fun, I don't seek them out. But when I see them, I go, God, I'm so glad I went through this. But I don't want to see that again. And that might be the case. And again, your taste might also evolve. You might finally like see some horror movies that are your speed, and now that you can understand them from that angle, you can appreciate them more. Like, they won't freak you out, but they'll evoke something, and then it'll make the next horror movie easier. So, try your best.
I wanted to point out a few letters we had here. A couple people wrote in following our Love Guru episode, just to correct us. There was a joke in the Love Guru about a Canadian pizza.
Oh, yeah.
Which was a Pop-Tart with ketchup on it. Several Canadians wrote in and said, that is not a thing.
Thank you. we were deeply concerned about Canada.
I mean, there's a lot to be concerned about Canada. You're too polite. What is going on? Why are you so nice? What are you hiding? Yeah. But yeah, we had some Canadian people write in and saying, no. And Mike Myers is Canadian. Why is he speaking for his fellow Canucks in such a derogatory fashion?
Funny, but like it's a weird thing because it sounds vaguely plausible.
Anyway,
like that's something someone might do.
Here's a letter from Sam. He says, "Hey guys, while listening to the episode of The Love Guru and The Holy Mountain, I had this prevailing thought, I hope one day I'm ready for Jodorowsky. Having never seen one of his films and having only the context from the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune. Based on that film, I was enamored with the man, but noted from the clips of his early work that it was too out there for me. This got me thinking about surrealist cinema. Is it something that you just have to dive into and hope? Or can you ease into it like an old person into a warm bath? If surrealism can be eased into, what if some of your suggestions? I know you'll mention David Lynch.
We will.
Whose films I haven't seen, insert judgment here. But I would like some variety, and that may lead me into Jodorowsky. Thanks for taking this question, assuming you do. You've made a fast fan out of this schmuck of a schmoes fan. Keep up the great work. Much gratitude, Sam."
Okay, so surrealist cinema, if anyone isn't super familiar with it, it's basically cinema you can't take literally. It's often deals with a lot of bizarre imagery that challenges you. It is very unexpected. And the idea behind surrealist cinema, and a lot of people spend a lot of their energy trying to figure out what it means. If it had a distinct meaning, it wouldn't be surrealist cinema. It's trying to challenge you to open up your brain and figure it out for yourself. And your answers will be very different from the answers of literally anyone else who watches it. And that's worthwhile.
Surrealism and David Lynch and even the founders of surrealism, like you go back to Tristan Tzara and André Breton and the people who wrote manifestos on this stuff, said that sort of interpretation, that sort of one-to-one symbolism was not what surrealism was about.
Exactly my point.
They wanted it to be they practice a form of what they called automatic writing, where you literally try to distract yourself with something and just let your hand write, and that is going to be a much more pure version of the human mind than any other kind of art. Surrealism is not everyone's bag because a lot of people go to film for story and for character and for very kind of traditional structured tales, and surrealism deliberately eschews all of that. It is a more pure form of art. Now I feel, and
there are very extreme surrealist movies that are just totally surrealist from beginning to end, and then there are a lot of films that try to bridge the gap between reality and surrealism by including surrealist elements. A great example of this is Alfred Hitchcock's Spellbound, which features...
Well, that's a straightforward movie with a surrealist scene.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's my point. It could be a good way to sort of delve into it.
Okay.
Because Spellbound is a story about a psychiatrist, the distinction sometimes escapes me, who is trying to help a guy deal with some trauma that he has buried and unlock memories. And there's a dream sequence which was designed by Salvador Dali. And his dream sequence is super crazy surreal, and it might help sort of look at it in that context of dreams and dreamlike imagery and surrealism can be used to unlock things in our mind because of how we interpret. So that might be a good gateway.
Yeah. I would go to Jean Cocteau.
Jean Cocteau's great. Beauty and the Beast is a good example.
Beauty and the Beast, that's another gateway, I think. Because Beauty and the Beast, he made some very aggressively surrealist films, like The Blood of a Poet was one of his early films, and that's it's like a Dali film. It's just just imagery, and you're not really sure what you're seeing. But I think Jean Cocteau has enough in his work where you're able to kind of get your fingernails into it, because he deals with things you can recognize, things like longing, artistic ambition, and a lot of sexuality, and these are things you can kind of see the relationships, and he is arranging pieces even though they're not necessarily on a board, they're just stuck to the walls. And I think when you get into a surrealism, it's kind of more of a mood that's really being communicated to you. You're absorbing a story, not necessarily a story, but you're absorbing a mind. You're absorbing another. Thoughts are just being shunted directly into your brain rather than having those pesky walls and interpretations like characters and stories. Yeah. Characters and stories are used in surrealism to obfuscate, from the surrealist perspective, they're used to obfuscate the true intention. You can put a theme, or you can put a mood, or you can put an idea in a film, but you have to hide it in this story structure. Surrealism does away with the extraneous stuff and gives you just the mood and just the scene. So if you maybe look at it from that perspective, that you're getting something without fetters rather than with all of these things in the way of meaning, you might be able to accept it a little bit better.
My gateway to surrealism, I'd seen some beforehand, but the one that made me go, ooh, I want more of this, was... It's not the David Lynch film everyone else usually picks. Most people veer towards Eraserhead or Blue Velvet. For me, it's Lost Highway.
Yeah.
Which I think we mentioned already on this episode. Lost Highway was described by David Lynch as a mystery with all the clues taken out. So you just get all the weird stuff, but all the connective tissue, all the information you might need to actually make the story make sense, gone. It is the story of a jazz musician who thinks his wife might be having an affair. He runs into a mysterious pale man at a party. He says, "We've met before." And the jazz musician says, "Have we?" He says, "Yeah, at your house. I'm there right now. Call me." And he calls his house, and the guy in front of him is at the house.
It's on the other end of the phone.
Yeah, it's really creepy and awesome. And then something horrible happens, and then he's a different actor now. And it gets really weird from there on. Lost Highway is full of bizarre sequences that don't make a lot of sense in any context, really. But the idea that you know that they kind of should make sense gets your gears turning. And the cool thing about Lost Highway is that it's very what's the word? It's kind of pulpy in a lot of ways. Like, it plays with a lot of, there's some crime tropes in there. There's murder. There's sex. There's a fantastic soundtrack with work by Trent Reznor and Marilyn Manson and Rammstein. So, like, there's a lot of things that keep you actively engaged, as though you know this is playing kind of like a movie.
but you also quite.
But you also know it doesn't make sense. But you also know it probably should make sense. And it really just... I spent years just really thinking about Lost Highway, and I've moved on to other films, but like there were years where Lost Highway was my favorite movie just because it really got my brain engaged.
You know what? There's also another angle you can take in all of this. And this is all very intellectual, and we're all wandering down these dark paths and trying to make very cerebral. There's a much easier way to go about this, and it's through something like Monty Python.
That's more Dadaism, isn't
well,
it?
but it's related. It's adjacent, and these people who are trying to make humor out of just the inherent absurdity of human life, and sometimes it's just sort of. I hate to use the word random; it's overused, but
non sequitur.
Non sequitur. It's because it's never random. Somebody wrote that.
Just the connection between non sequitur basically means the connection between this thing and the thing that followed it. It seems like there is none.
Yeah.
Nothing is completely disconnected though, and if you really think hard enough, you'll find a connection. But they don't seem like they go together.
Yeah. So, and you can. There's something primal about that type of surrealism that you can understand because it makes you laugh.
Yeah. Surrealism can be really entertaining.
Yeah, and if you want to track down Steven Soderbergh's 1996 film Schizopolis, maybe one of his best movies. That is just absurdism through and through, and you can tell he's just sort of being strange for the sake of it. He wrote a book about making Schizopolis called "Getting Away with It" because he's clearly getting away with something.
Yeah,
that
Schizopolis is very entertaining.
Schizopolis is just boldly funny, very strange. You won't be able to understand it, and you won't care.
Well, surrealism is also can be very effective in horror as well.
Like in the video in The Ring is a good example.
That's
of
a great example. That's within a non-surrealist movie that is an example of surrealist cinema. That's a good example. A great, entertaining, good luck explaining it surrealist horror movie would be Nobuhiko Obayashi's Hausu, aka House. There's a couple of horror movies named House, one of which is a haunted house movie.
Not the 1986 version, the 1977 Japanese film.
The 86 version is actually a really good movie. They're unrelated. They just happen to be both named House and be about haunted houses. Hausu is a story of a bunch of schoolgirls who go off to an isolated house for the weekend, and then there are severed heads that are watermelons, and cat paintings eat people, and someone gets cut in half, and their legs keep like karate kicking monsters, and it's insanity. It's insanity from start to finish, and it is amazingly watchable. And the last person I'm going to recommend as a gateway to surrealism would be one of my favorite filmmakers who I think everyone agrees is brilliant but doesn't get talked about enough, Jan Svankmajer.
The Czech animator.
Yeah, Jan Svankmajer is an animator. He works in the realm of stop motion animation, but he often works in the realm of live action stop motion animation, which he'll take a live person and film them the way you would stop motion animation, one frame at a time, and it creates this herky-jerky, dreamlike quality. The one I'd recommend starting there would be his adaptation of Alice in Wonderland.
It's just called Alice.
Yeah, and it has the structure of Alice in Wonderland, a book which is also very surreal in a lot of ways. But his dream of Alice in Wonderland is creepy as fuck. Like, all the animals, they're dead taxidermied animals. It's a very surreal experience. So it's going to be a little creepy, but it's also, it's a storybook mentality, so it might be a good gateway as well. Anyway, do we have time for one more?
Last one. One more. You read this one.
All right, last one. I want to try to pick a good one.
They're all good. They're from our listeners.
Well, that's
our
true,
listeners are all intelligent, sexy, attractive people.
Well, I mean,
because they listen to this show. That's how you can tell.
That is 100% true, and I love you all. Let's see.
Tongue kiss every one of you if I could.
Let's see what we got here. Okay, so here's one from Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Dear Bibbs and Witney, this is more of a Bibbs question, but I always appreciate Whitney's insights as well. So that's why I'm addressing it to you both. You can just address it to me. It's fine.
No, I'll go get a drink. I'll be right back.
My 6-year-old niece recently visited a Japanese cultural center and fell in love with Japan. I want to be a cool uncle and introduce her to anime, but I'm not sure what can be a gateway, especially given her very young age. What would you suggest? Stay critically acclaimed. That's a great question.
My Neighbor Totoro, obviously.
Yeah, My Neighbor Totoro is a lot of the Studio Ghibli films, not all of them, but a lot of them are geared towards all ages, including the very young. Any mature themes that some of these films have will go over their heads, and they'll just sort of be enchanted by the wondrousness of it. My Neighbor Totoro is a film that is... it's on my top 10 films ever made, period. I probably in my top 5.
It's so cute.
You cannot watch My Neighbor Totoro and not feel better afterwards. I challenge you. I don't know how you could do it. It's a story of 2 young girls. They move to the country with their father so they can be closer to their mother, who is in the hospital. And while they move there, they realize that the woods nearby are enchanted and full of magical creatures. And that's it. But there's no horrible plot. There's no one to stop an evil wizard. They're just, things are nice and magical, and the world is full of wonder. Nothing terribly challenging. There's a couple of emotional bits towards the end as the girls are worried about their mom. But spoiler alert, it turns out okay. So I think a young girl will be perfectly capable of enjoying it.
There's plenty of anime in like children's channels on many of the streaming services. It's actually been pretty carefully curated, but that's really like pop stuff, and it's all like dubbed and recut for American audiences.
Some of it's really good though. There's a great one on Netflix called Little Witch Academia, which
I know you're a big fan of this one.
I'm a big fan of it. It's really great. It is basically Harry Potter, but from the perspective of young women. And they're kind of open about that. Like, it's about a magical academy, and they reuse a few elements of the Harry Potter idea. Harry Potter didn't invent that, by the way. That goes way back to stuff like The Worst Witch and other stories as well. But this is just a super fun version of it, and it's really dynamic, and the animation's fantastic. So that's a good one as well. I'm trying to think what else I would super recommend.
Pokemon's too commercial. It's also a terribly simple idea that has just somehow strangely persisted through the culture. They're still making new Pokemon cartoons.
They are. And listen,
I don't know how many. I think there are over 20 feature films at this point.
I'm not decrying Pokemon, but its existence is a little commercial, I think.
Gotta collect them all.
That's literally what it's about. And that's not the worst thing ever. But at the same time, you want to introduce someone, you want to introduce them to something kind of magical. You don't necessarily want to introduce them to something that's just going to make them want to buy products. So from like the Studio Ghibli school, you look at something like probably Porco Rosso. It's probably pretty good for little kids. Ponyo is a bit frantic sometimes, but I think it's really magical, and I really like it a lot.
My son likes Ponyo.
Ponyo's great. I like Ponyo a lot. It gets a bum rap, I think, sometimes.
an anime film that came out a couple years ago that got a lot of acclaim at the time, but I haven't heard mentioned much since then, was The Tale of the Princess Kaguya.
You think that's okay for young girls? I think it's a little heavy.
It's maudlin and it's kind of slow moving, but I think it's simple. Oh, you know what? Instead of that, watch My Neighbors the Yamadas.
Okay.
That's another Studio Ghibli film that is filmed in this really kind of... It's a much more broadly visual style. It looks like, crayons and pencils. It's not quite as sharp as the anime you're used to. But My Neighbors the Yamadas is a Studio Ghibli film that is just sort of a situation comedy. It's really episodic about a family that sort of bickers and they have their miniature dramas, and it's just about how they end up getting along and as a family. It's really, really very sweet. That's a recommendation I can give you.
Fair enough. Anyway, there's more stuff out there. I'm sure there's a lot of articles dedicated to anime that could be appropriate for kids, but I think that hopefully give you a little bit of a start. Anime is a really rich medium. It's basically the animated medium, but Japan has a very particular storytelling aesthetic that it becomes. A lot of people think of it as a genre. There's a million genres within it, many of which I'm currently discovering.
It's more of a style, and a lot of American animators, especially in the last 15 years or so, have been borrowing very, very heavily from anime. But yeah, there's plenty of genres from horror to fantasy to just regular old dramas. There's, I saw an anime film called Whisper of the Heart, which is just about kids getting along. And there's no fantastical elements whatsoever. And that's not something you might see in America. There's
a really, really nice series that's on Crunchyroll. You can track
anime
down
streaming service.
Yeah, and it's great. I think it's free with ads, or like it's a really low cost with ads, but you can get it without ads as well. There's a really, really good one that I think would be good for anybody called Flying Witch. Kiki's Delivery Service is another great one, by the way. Flying Witch is about a witch who moves to a town and things are nice.
And that's it.
That's it. There's this whole subgenre of anime, and I wish I could remember what it was called. My wife would know. That is basically just about relaxing and being pleasant, and things are okay. And it's, a lot of American or Western art is designed to grab your attention and keep you sucked in, and like make sure you don't like get distracted and look at this thing. Come on, look at it. And there's a lot of art out there, and a lot of it is coming from Japan, for example, that is recognizing that people have a lot of that, and they also want other things, and one of those things is to calm down and chill. And there's a lot of super chill anime out there, and Flying Witch is a very sweet one, and I highly recommend it.
I would love to see a film like that to come out of like the Marvel canon. Here's a day, and he doesn't put on the Iron Man suit, just goes for a walk. And he has a chili dog, and it's really nice, and he has a nice conversation. And that's Iron Man 4.
That'd be fine. I'd like that.
In Japanese poetry, there's a phenomenon where the poet is encouraged to add extra words to a line that they're not out of context. They're not sort of surrealist words, but it's like just an extra little intensifier that doesn't necessarily technically add anything to the line, but it does give the poem a different sort of rhythm. Not just meter, but a different sort of feeling. And those words are called pillow words. And there are certain types of Japanese cinema that have that same sort of languid approach to their aesthetic. Roger Ebert called a lot of the shots in Ozu's films pillow shots. They don't serve any sort of function other than to give you a moment to take a breath. Yeah. And I think those are the kinds of films that would work best for a really small child. Yeah. Where they can kind of sit, think, and breathe a lot. It doesn't have to be frantic action the whole time. So,
I highly recommend, because I think a lot of people want to show kids the stuff kids want to see. And it makes sense. But it's also important, I think, to give kids like a really well-rounded diet of media. So there's going to be all the stuff they want to watch on Disney, Star Wars Rebels, and a lot of it's really good. A lot of it's really good. But when they're young and they have the capacity to absorb, it's really important to expose them to different kinds of art. So this is a really good time to make sure they're also watching some classic cinema, so that later on it won't feel like such a jarring shift to see different acting styles or visual styles. Quieter movies. A lot of my favorite movies when I was a kid were really quiet. Hell, there were silent movies. A lot of them. So don't be afraid to show them something mild. I think reminding children that it's okay that the world is quiet is something that we lose sometimes, especially nowadays, that
so many people are competing for your attention.
yeah, there's a lot of distractions now, and to just sort of sit and enjoy something, even if it's a movie, it is bright lights on a screen, it can be really relaxing and sweet.
And we're probably making this point because it's very late and we're both very tired.
It's 2:53 in the morning. We are done.
You don't have to tell them what time it is.
It is 2:53 in the morning. We are done. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this bonus episode of Critically Acclaimed.
We didn't even get to all your letters, but we'll be better about catching up in the future.
We put a really good dent in them. We can't read all of them sometimes just because they cover the same topic, and we don't need to cover.
Some of you write very long letters. We read them. We're very appreciative, but we can't necessarily read a screed on our show.
We have to curate a lot, but we wanted to really give you a lot of time. So thank everybody for writing in. If you want to write into the show proper, it is criticallyacclaimedfans@gmail.com. We read your letters. A lot of them make it onto the air. Some of them don't. And for that, we do apologize. But keep writing in. Maybe your next one will. We'll be back later this week with our usual episode. Don't forget to check us out at Canceled Too Soon, where we have a whole bunch of cool stuff going on. It's pilot season, so we're reviewing a bunch of failed TV pilots, including the pilot episode for Alexander, a show about Alexander the Great, starring William Shatner and Adam West.
And John Cassavetes.
And Joseph Cotton. If you don't know who those people are, you should, because that makes that sentence weird. Those are actors who should not be in the same movie together. That's super awesome.
Although, not to disappoint, but Adam West plays a very small role.
Who cares?
But he's in it.
Well, actually, we'll talk about that because there's an interview with Adam West where he explained some plans that we had for the show. But anyway, I digress. Anyway, so that's going on over there in the Cancel Too Soon. That's on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever fine podcasts are located. And enjoy everything else on the Schnoz No Network. I'm on Twitter at William Bibbiani.
I'm at Witney Seibold.
And never forget, everyone's a critic.
I want to go to the midnight show. I'm sorry, what?